Hey, and welcome. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. A lot coming up for you this hour. A little bit later on in the hour, maybe some good news coming out of the U.S. trade negotiations with China. Plus, the Democrats want to ban every single thing on the planet except for Democrats. Like all of it. Fracking, nuclear power, straws, meat, airplanes, like all the things that make modernity pretty great. Because for most of human history, basically the environment was trying to kill us. And then we discovered how to make the environment work with us and for us. And now Democrats are like, let's go back to living in caves and letting the environment try to kill us again. That's probably the best way. That's a mild exaggeration, but only a mild exaggeration, as we'll talk about. Joining us on the line, however, to discuss all things news and entertainment related is Dennis Miller. He's host of the Dennis Miller Option. You can listen and subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts on the Westwood One Podcast Network. Dennis, good to talk to you, dude. How are you?
Young Ben, how are you, my friend?
You know, I'm hanging in there. I did 7 hours yesterday of climate change TV with the Democrats. And it took a full 8 years, which is not even possible. But I did learn many, many things about what Democrats plan to do to stop climate change. Apparently, they want to abort every baby that is poor. They want to ban airplanes, and they want to raise taxes. And they think this is a winning agenda for 2020. I don't know if you watched any of that. I mean, you're live, so I assume not. But what did you make of all of this?
Well, Bernie's crazy with the abortion. I'm telling you, the left believes in cradle to the grave entitlement. They just make it really hard to get into the cradle. And I'm telling you something, if they take the White House back next year, we are so fracked, my friend. It is unbelievable. I remember when I used to watch CNN to watch Bill Tush do the weather. Now it's just every time they put something up, it's the end of the world as we know it. And for God's sakes, at this point, Spuds McBiden is going full bore Cujo in time-lapse photography during the actual town hall. And, he's 3 days out from being bib adjacent, much less the president of the United States.
Well, it is amusing to watch Joe Biden stagger around. I mean, he could theoretically stagger his way to the presidency if he can make it through the primaries, simply because he's effectively a block of wood running against President Trump. Everybody knows the block of wood. It isn't particularly threatening. It seems kind of dumb, but then again, at least it's not going to yell at you all that often. But he does seem extraordinarily weak up there. And you put him up there against these radicals like Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, he does look pretty tepid.
Well, at this point, the podiums are looking back over their shoulder and say, quit leaning on me so hard. He's like the raging bull. He just walks around. I never went down, Ray. I never went down. But I can't believe, listen, they're supposed to be progressive over there. This will show you how this is all about one thing and one thing only. And I don't even know if it is Trump as much as it is that Hillary lost. They are so shattered that their great champion went forth and was not a good candidate, and they've got Trump. But something pivotal has happened, Ben. You know it as well as I do. I think a lot of people in the country know it. I think they know it's gone so far off the rails that nobody's going to say anything about it. But I do think when they go to vote next year, they're going to say, well, Trump is brusque, and Trump is a bull in a china closet, and Trump is impolite. But I think Trump's still continent, and I'm not sure you can say that over there anymore.
I mean, between the inability to control the brain-to-mouth function and the policies that they are proposing, it is truly astonishing. And they're not just planning, so they have this 7 hours of climate change talk, which is just, if you want to cut ads for the Trump campaign, you should at least get the Trump campaign to pay you for it. They just cut ads for Trump. Apparently now they're going to have, CNN and Human Rights Campaign have announced that they are going to have a 2020 Democratic presidential town hall focused on issues affecting the LGBTQ community. And the entire town hall is going to focus on that, which is just going to be a bevy of more ads for the Trump campaign, because Joe Biden babbling on how many genders there are. I mean, frankly, I'm much more likely to watch that one than I was to watch the climate change one, just to see Joe Biden try to explain what these pronouns mean, like what she means and all of this. But are the Democrats, did they have a death wish?
I think Biden thinks the cue is for Quasimodo. Listen, if they want to return to the center point here and at least set them up as somebody who's going to posit these way out notions but are willing to answer hard questions, they should have Dave Chappelle moderate that next LGBTQ debate. Because I don't know if you saw that special. And like I said, at the end of the day, to me as a comedian, it was just funny. But within that funny, boy, did he weave a lot of wisdom. And you know what? They've adjusted too quickly. They should have phased this in over there, and it'll show you that they're not smart enough to take back power, I don't believe, in that they don't see that their best play against Trump would be some sort of reasoned discourse in the middle, because Trump's doing enough harm to himself. It's death by 1,000 weird tweet paper cuts. But they don't realize that. They think they have to push all the chips in on crazy hands now. You know, they've got pocket deuces and they're going all in. And that proves to me they're not smart enough. There is a way for them to win next year, and they're kind of operating antithetically to that.
We're talking with Dennis Miller. He's host of the Dennis Miller Option. So, Dennis, you did mention Dave Chappelle's new special. I want to talk to you about that because obviously you're a comedian, and the fact is that Dave Chappelle is getting raked over the coals by a bunch of folks on the left in the woke media who are suggesting that instead of speaking truth to power, he was speaking truth on behalf of the powerful, and that he didn't check all of the proper woke boxes in this special, and thus Dave Chappelle has lost his touch. Dave Chappelle isn't who he used to be, because the only proper humor is the Hannah Gadsby humor where you never laugh. Real humor, if we really understood it, is the kind of humor where you never laugh, but you are provoked to think. What did you make of Chappelle's special overall, and what did you make of the woke response to it?
Well, listen, he's a clever anarchist, and that's where comedy's always worked the best. And to be raked over the coals by people who increasingly appear to be book burners is certainly a place that you want to be, on the vanguard of this. Now, I thought it was an absolutely brilliant special. If he was standing up there making points the whole time, I would have thought it was a brilliant TED Talk. But that's not it. He caved me in. Big bolo punches, laughing out loud, and then putting the wisdom in the B position. If you come out and you're just going on and being avuncular and you forget to be funny, well, that's deadly. But Chappelle, boy, I've liked Dave for years, but that was of consequence. That's like seeing Pryor in that first special. That's like, that's a tectonic moment. And boy, it must hurt them, because they've always posited him as I'm sorry to use the word posit 8 times. They've always positioned him as the wisest of the gurus. And let's face facts, he's deadly accurate about this stuff, and that's why it hurt them so much.
Yeah, Dennis, what I'm starting to see is that the comedic community is beginning to rebel against the constraints that are placed upon them by the woke skulls of the left. I mean, I don't know if you saw Aziz Ansari's new special on Netflix. He did what he felt he had to do to sort of appease the left by apologizing for something he didn't do wrong in terms of his relationship with a woman who then tried to shame him for not calling her the next day or something. But in any case, he did that, and then the rest of the special was about how the progressive left is supremely irritating with all their woke nonsense. He says in the special, he's like, I'd rather you guys would just call me a poo and stop with all of this trying to cater to me all the time in the most paternalistic possible fashion. It seems like the comedic world is waking up to the fact that the left is absolutely humorless at this point, and if comedy is to survive, then it can't be done from the perspective of the left.
The only time that the left doesn't push for the feminization of the culture is when they deem somebody off the reservation and have to decry him as paternalistic. That's the only time you'll hear that phrase anymore, is when somebody goes off the talking points, and then, only then, do they pull out the term paternalistic. I don't know Aziz Ansari's work, so I can't really say, but it would appear to me at one point he was ostracized by the Handmaid's Tale people because he had a date that went clumsy. Are you kidding me? This is why they're putting people in stocks in Salem? That's what's coming next from the left. They so control Hollywood. There'll be a Real Housewives of Salem, Massachusetts, and they'll all be walking around in those flying nun hats and just decrying everybody. They've overplayed their hand. They had a smart play here if they just looked reasonably normal and leaned left. They didn't. They've gone all the way over. It's like that old amusement park ride, the wild mouse. All they had to do was carve these turns like an expert skier in a giant slalom. Instead, they got down to the end and did a hard 90-degreer that is even setting off alarms in people's heads who are predisposed to lean left. It's bad tactics.
We're speaking Dennis Miller, host of the Dennis Miller Options. Dennis, I also wanted to ask about the other big story of the week, and that is Walmart now saying they're not going to sell ammunition anymore. I'm obviously deeply skeptical of the new push that we see from mainly the folks on the left to hijack the halls of corporate power and use them for their own political agenda. I find it highly ironic that the same folks who spend all day decrying the evils of big corporations, they're so terrible, we need to break them up, they're so horrible, they are not people, they shouldn't be involved in politics or in campaigns, but they should also be deciding for you what you get to buy from the stores, even if what you're buying from the store is legal. I mean, we're starting to see this extend not just to big box stores like Walmart. There are people pushing that Visa should start turning down your ability to use a Visa card in order to buy legal products. This seems extraordinarily dangerous to me for the public, for sort of public discourse and the future of the country.
Well, before they go after Visa, the credit card, can we get people to have visas to come here? I mean, it's absolutely crazy. The border's a sieve, but they're going after Visa credit cards. And as far as the Waltons go, listen, what if somebody, Ben, I'll just ask you this. What if somebody woke up that day in the Walton family, and there's probably, 4 or 5 kids run it? I don't even know. It's like, a wealthy Addams family to me. But what if somebody woke up and said, this is wearing on me. I don't want to sell things that are wearing on me. It's like the Winchester Mystery House up in San Jose, California. The woman, her husband died. He was the Winchester fortune. And she was so haunted by all the people that were killed, she spent the rest of her life turning the house into an Escher print. It's a testimony to human paranoia almost. But it was her choice to do. Now, listen, I live near a Costco, so I'm a Costco guy. And I know the guy who runs Costco. I don't even know if he's still alive as a Democrat. Guess what? I'm going out to buy crab legs. I can't wake up every day and figure out what Costco wants to do, what Walmart wants to do, what Target wants to do. I'm living a life here, and some of that's dropping away from me. All I can say about the Walmart is they can choose what they want to do. If they want to pretend that Bentonville, Arkansas is the Riviera, that's fine too. Whatever they want to sell in there is fine, as long as they all continue to sell crab legs. None of my business.
Dennis Miller, host of the Dennis Miller Option. Dennis, good to talk to you. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks, dude. Hang in there.
All right, Ben. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.
In just a little while, we're going to talk about the Democrats on global warming. Plus, as I mentioned before, they have now announced that they will be hosting an LGBTQ town hall with 2020 candidates. I can't see how this goes wrong for the Democrats in any possible way. A bunch of Democrats up there competing for the pleasure of a particular interest group and doing so by pledging public policy that will affect hundreds of millions of Americans. I can't see how this goes wrong in any possible way. So as I have been talking about, the Democrats are now going to have a CNN and Human Rights Campaign sponsored town hall with the 2020 candidates on LGBTQASBLY issues. According to Huffington Post, the Human Rights Campaign Foundation announced on Wednesday it's partnering with CNN to host a 2020 Democratic presidential town hall focused on issues affecting the LGBTQ community. The event, named Power of Our Pride, is set to take place at the Novo, an LA venue, on October 10th. That is the night before the 31st annual National Coming Out Day, which is always a very exciting time. For nearly 40 years, the Human Rights Campaign has fought to realize a world in which LGBTQ people are safe, equal, and free in every aspect of our lives, said HRC President Alfonso David in a statement. Today, at a time when our most basic civil rights and democratic values are under attack, our work has never been more urgent. I can think of a few times when your work was more urgent, like when most of the activity that you guys are engaged in was criminal. It seems like it was more urgent then. Or maybe when gay people were literally imprisoned for acting in homosexual fashion, like that seems like it was more urgent then. When gay marriage is legal in the United States and anti-discrimination laws exist on the books of most states, pretty sure that that's not the most urgent time in history, just as a historical matter. Okay. Then Alfonso David said, "We are eager to hear from this field of Democratic presidential candidates about how they plan to win full federal equality, defend the fundamental equality of LGBTQ people, and protect the most vulnerable among us, both here in the U.S. and around the globe, from stigma, institutional inequality, discrimination, and violence." From stigma? Like from people having opinions? Listen, I think that we should treat everybody with grace and decency, but is it the government's job to protect people from stigma? Like that seems a little bit much to me. Now, the reason that this is a particularly bad idea for the Democrats is because you know that one of the questions that will be asked and should be asked and ought to be asked is how many genders are there? And if you think it is not an attack ad for Joe Biden to be stumbling around trying to name genders, well, first there's he, then there's she, then there's she, then there's xi, there's they, it, whom, attack helicopter. Like, if you think that's not going to be a fantastic attack ad, you are wrong. Also, you know it'll be great? When all the Democrats have vowed to track down, hunt down, and imprison every religious person who owns a business in America and who does not wish to participate in a same-sex wedding. Not even somebody who won't serve gay people. Somebody who just doesn't want to participate in a same-sex wedding. And you'll be like Kamala Harris, the narc, is going to be like, I'm going to imprison that person. That person doesn't want to go. They're not cheering loud enough at the same-sex wedding. I will imprison that person. This is going to go great. Now, how do I know this is going to go great? Because they just did this on climate change, and it went fan-freaking-tastic for the Democrats, by which I mean disaster area. Basically, every single Democrat got up there and talked about all the things they were going to ban, like all of them. In fact, we have a montage of Democrats talking about all the various things that they wish to ban because of climate change.
Offshore drilling for oil. Would you ban it?
Yes. We will transition off of fossil fuels, natural gas, coal, oil.
What about the export of fossil fuels from the United States? Would you ban that?
Absolutely, we must get to that point.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
I'm in favor of a carbon-free America.
In my administration, we're not going to build any new nuclear power plants.
We set out the rules for what kind of plant, coal burning plants. No one's going to build another coal burning. We've got to shut the ones down we have.
We're going to end factory farming because that is a danger to the environment and to climate change.
Also on the agenda, plastic straws, gone. You have to use those crap paper straws that collapse in on themselves so that you can't actually draw the liquid from the vessel. Also, we have to get rid of meat. Meat's bad, right? No more eating meat. Not just we're going to recommend you eat less meat for the environment, we're just going to get rid of the eating of the meat. That has to stop completely. We are also going to be getting rid of the flying of the airplanes. Like, that has to stop. I'm not kidding. Democrats said all of these things. Now, no matter who is nominated, do you think that President Trump might cut an ad showing the Democrats talking about ruining your life? Right? Because that's what they're talking about. The whole point of civilization is that you can have a plastic straw. And guess what? Plastic straws aren't killing anybody. Okay, this whole thing about plastic straws, they're ruining the environment. Then why are you giving me a plastic cup at Starbucks, you idiots? There's a lot more plastic in the plastic cup. If you want to talk about the top polluters in terms of plastics on planet Earth, the United States does not rank. But apparently we got all the things that are good about civilization. We have to do it. Now, do Democrats actually intend to do any of this? Of course not. See, for Democrats, it's all about signaling to their base how much they care. How much do you care? I care so much, I'm even willing to tell you not to fly an airplane, eat any meat, and get rid of your plastic straws. That's how much I care. How much do you care, Bernie? I want to spend $16 trillion on this plan. Wow, that's a lot of caring, Bernie. How much would you spend, AOC? I'll spend $93 trillion. Oh my God, she cares so much. Unbelievable, the levels of caring. I mean, I really wish that I could run my marriage like this, right? To show my wife how much I care, I'll just be like, sweetheart, you know what I really would love to do for you? I would love to buy for you a $1 million ring. And she'd be like, great, where is it? I'd be like, nope, it's the intention that counts. It's the intention behind that counts, right? I would love to every morning just put out a path of rose petals from our bedroom to the kitchen where I've prepared for you a nice, beautiful breakfast. You'd be like, well, why don't you just do it? Nope, no. You understand? I'd love to do that. I can't make that happen. I can't. It's a thing that's not going to happen. But again, it's that I'm showing I care by saying things, the things that come out of my face. That's the caring, not the doing. I mean, also, I don't want to clean up the rose petals, and you think I can cook breakfast? I can barely boil an egg. What are you talking about? That's the Democrats' entire agenda. Now, as we will see, it is not just that the Democrats' agenda is ridiculous. It is that it does nothing to actually stop climate change. So, the Democrats had a 7-hour, I'm not kidding, this is like, it's longer than the Lord of the Rings trilogy, 7-hour climate change extravaganza. There were dancing girls, and it's like a Busby Berkeley musical. There were women swimming around in synchronized fashion in pools. It was wild. Alternatively, it was a bunch of boring-ass politicians talking about stuff they don't understand. It was the second one, in case you missed it. There's nothing spectacular about it unless you're really, really into Chris Cuomo. And if you are, see a doctor. So the Democrats basically pledged that they were going to do everything under the sun to stop the planet from warming, except for all the things that would actually stop the planet from warming. So first of all, I think it is necessary to point out a few things about climate change. I am what you call a lukewarmer, okay, meaning that I believe that climate change is happening. I believe that the vast majority of climate change is indeed caused by human activity. I also do not know the sensitivity of the climate to carbon. Neither does anybody else, because there's a lot of play in the joints. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they suggest somewhere in the range of 2 degrees Celsius to 6 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. In case you missed that, that'd be like a 300% range. That's a pretty large range. of differential. Now, you just don't know the answer. Okay, so take all that for granted, that this is happening, that humans are causing it, and that we probably don't want to wreck the entire world economy, because as it turns out, when people are poor, they really don't care whether it's a little hotter outside. You know what they really care about? Not being dead. And you know how you make people not dead? By raising the GDP. And you know how you raise the GDP is by using cheap energy. And you know what that does? It creates carbon emissions. So it turns out that the best way of making people care about the environment is to make them rich. There's a fairly good study and basically suggests that once countries get to a point where the citizens are making like $3,200 a year in GDP per capita, then they start to care about the environment. Up until then, they're like, are you kidding me? I'm supposed to care about Miami flooding. I'm literally sitting here with my 9 children burning animal dung for heat, and you're whining at me about how it's going to be a little hotter outside for you in your centrally air-conditioned home? Yeah, you can stuff it. So let's talk about how exactly you could curb climate change if you were going to. To do that, you first have to discuss what exactly is happening with the climate. So again, the climate has gotten warmer over the past century and a half. It seems to be accelerating a bit. These are some statistics from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, from the Trump administration. Okay, these are statistics that have been released over the past few years, going all the way back to 1900, and basically shows that since approximately 1950, you're looking at about a 2 degree Celsius change, which is pretty significant change over time. Now, does that mean that it's going to continue heating up at this rate? No, especially because it seems like carbon emissions are leveling off from the industrialized world. Is it a problem? Sure, we don't know how much of a problem it's going to be. When it comes to human activity, that's the stuff we can mitigate the most easily. So when it comes to ocean acidification and the destruction of coral reefs, then that's the stuff that's hard to gauge and hard to prevent. When it comes to you live in a big city, the big city is going to have rising sea levels. Well, that's why we build seawalls. That is why people move, right, over the course of a century. Now, where is the climate change coming from? Where are the greenhouse gas emissions coming from? Here is a chart. I like charts because charts have data in them. And that data is the stuff that Democrats don't actually want to talk about. This is from the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, which, as it turns out, is actually not a right-wing source on this stuff. Their mission is to advance a strong policy and action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promote clean energy, and strengthen resilience to climate impacts. So lest you think that I'm cherry-picking this data, in fact, I'm using the data that is handed out by activists who are very focused on stopping climate change. They're the successor to the Pew Center on Global Climate Change. These stats should be pretty good. Okay, here's what it shows. It shows that the greenhouse gas emissions for major economies, basically the U.S. has leveled off, and the EU has declined, and the Chinese are ratcheting up their greenhouse gas emissions exponentially, in extraordinary fashion, right? Since 1990, the Chinese went from something like, I guess this is million tons of CO2 that are emitted per year. They went from 4 trillion tons of CO2 emitted per year in about 1990, and now they're at about 12 trillion. So they've basically tripled the amount of carbon dioxide that they're emitting into the atmosphere. That's the Chinese. The United States was at about 5 trillion tons as of 1990, and we're about 5 trillion tons today. The EU was about 4.5. They're now at about 4. So what this shows is that the industrialized Western world is doing a fairly good job of trying to bring down its emissions, or at least stabilize them. Most of the emissions growth is happening in the developing world, which means that whatever we try to do, it ain't going to be enough because we only represent about 15% of global carbon emissions. Now, how about greenhouse gas intensity, meaning for each dollar of GDP produced, who is producing the most greenhouse gases? And the answer here is that the United States is actually below world average. I mean, we have very, very high GDP, and we also have high emissions, but on a dollar-to-dollar basis, Russia and China are blowing it out. They are creating far more emissions than the United States is on a dollar-to-dollar basis. Not close, in fact. We're about at the same level as India and Brazil right now. Okay, now, let's take a look at the global man-made greenhouse gas emissions by sector. Like, where's it all coming from? Now, if you listen to the left in the United States, you'd figure it's from meat eating, and it's from you driving, right? Those would be the two big ones they're always focusing on, meat eating and driving. Well, if you look at it in the United States, transportation represents about 29% of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. If you look at agriculture, it's 9%. 9%. The rest of it is electricity, which we all need, and industry, which we all need, and commercial and residential, which we all need. Those three elements represent somewhere on the order of 62% of all greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector in the United States. Now let's look globally. Where is all the climate change coming from globally? What you see is for the EPA. What you see is that 72% of all greenhouse gas emissions are in the energy sector, globally speaking. Okay, not in driving, not in agriculture, in the energy sector, which suggests that unless you come up with some other form of creating energy, you're screwed. There's one problem with this. There is no great other form of energy. William Nordhaus, the current Nobel Prize winner in economics, in his book Climate Casino, he has a chart showing the average cost per amount of electricity created. There's a table in his book, and it shows estimates by the U.S. Energy Information Administration of the costs of different kinds of power generation. Okay, well, what you will see is that conventional combined cycle natural gas, it costs about $2.05 for a particular amount of electricity to be generated. And it's available now. It's a mature, developed technology. Conventional coal is the next most efficient in terms of cost, followed by wind, geothermal, advanced coal, biomass. And then when you get way the hell up there, you're talking about solar photovoltaic and solar thermal. In other words, all the sources that the left really, really loves, like wind and solar power, that stuff is wildly inefficient on a cost basis. Very, very inefficient. And when it comes to even nuclear is good for like electricity grids, but it ain't good for smaller units of electricity generation. There is simply no comparison between carbon-based fuel systems and other fuel systems. And Nordhaus recognizes this. He says in his book, the central question going forward is the prospect for economical low-carbon electricity. Wind is the only mature low-carbon technology. It's 50% more expensive than the best existing technology. Moreover, its capacity is limited in the United States. The other promising technologies with the possibility of large-scale deployments are, from least to most expensive, advanced natural gas with carbon capture and storage, advanced nuclear power, and advanced coal with CCS. That's carbon capture. These are 50 to 100% more expensive than the most economical existing technology. Moreover, they are still a long way from being ready for large-scale deployment. So what does Nordhaus recommend? Well, he points out natural gas is the cleanest of the fossil fuels, emitting about half as much carbon per kilowatt hour as coal when burned for electricity generation. He says shifting a greater fraction of electricity to natural gas is an important way of reducing carbon emissions. So naturally, Democrats want to prevent all of the methods of lowering emissions that would actually be effective. So you know how we get natural gas? We do something called fracking, where we go in and we liquefy shale. And here's Kamala Harris saying we should ban exactly the sort of practice that Nordhaus says is key to eliminating the growth of carbon emissions in the United States.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah.
And everybody cheers because they're idiots.
And starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue. And to your point, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities.
Okay, what the hell is she talking about? Fracking is actually rather safe on a general level. Also, she's eliminating natural gas, which is the reason why the United States has stabilized its carbon emissions over the past several years. And it's not just that. You've got the Democrats talking about banning nuclear. Okay, so nuclear, which is another source of energy that would be quite useful. They're talking about banning nuclear. They're not talking about using advanced coal for carbon capture technology. They're not talking about that. They're talking about just shutting down all the coal plants. That's what Joe Biden says. And this is nonsensical, folks. They are calling for elimination of commercial air travel, plastic straws, and meat. But also, they want to ban fracking, which is the best available way of lowering our reliance on coal right now. Geniuses. Alrighty, so as I say, the Democrats are not actually looking at these charts. They are failing to recognize that China would have to cooperate with us in a global carbon tax if you wanted to artificially increase the price of energy to the point where these undeveloped technologies are suddenly cheaper than coal and natural gas and oil. And they just sort of throw out there, yeah, let's do a carbon tax. Why the hell not? Let's do a carbon tax. Here's Joe Biden saying, yeah, I'm all for a carbon tax. So in other words, he wants to tax American citizens to lower our share of global carbon emissions from what, 15% to maybe 11%? And he wants to destroy our economy while China just does what it wants, which is what they've been doing. The left keeps whining about the Paris Climate Accords. After the Paris Climate Accords, the United States reduced its emissions more than any other industrialized country. You know who signed the Paris Climate Accords? China. You know what they did afterward? They emitted out the wazoo. Here's Joe Biden suggesting that we should just, on our own, tax our own citizens to no apparent end.
Would you support a carbon tax? Some other candidates say they would.
Yeah, no, I would. But here's what we have to do. Look, the bottom line of this is what we have to do is we have to understand that you need to be able to bring people and countries and interests together to get anything done. You can have the plans are great, but executing on those plans is a very different thing. We make up, it is the existential threat of not this generation, but the whole world, the existential threat that exists. We don't move on it.
I mean, there's mashed potatoes over there. I mean, it's just insane. He supports a carbon tax. We have to mobilize the whole world. Any plans for that? How? How would be the question. Elizabeth Warren also would love a carbon tax because she's just fallen in love with taxes. This is a very different Elizabeth Warren than the one who in 2003 was talking about not increasing the burden on middle-class taxpayers. You want to increase the burden on middle-class taxpayers? Tax carbon, my friends. It turns out, you know who can afford that? Rich people. You know who can't afford that? Anybody who gets the additional cost of electricity based on the carbon taxes she's seeking.
Most economists believe that a carbon tax is the most efficient way to reduce carbon emissions. Would you push for such a tax? And if not, please explain why you don't favor that approach.
So I think of this as what my mother taught me. And that is, you got to clean up your own messes. And that means if you're going to be spewing carbon into the air and messing up the air for the rest of us, it's your responsibility to clean it up. But yes, we need to say that those who are throwing the carbon into the air that the rest of us have to breathe, that the rest of us have to deal with, are the ones who are responsible for paying for that.
I mean, as it turns out, we're actually pretty good at breathing carbon dioxide, humans. It's not about the breathing. It's actually about the climate change. So missed on that one. But it is amazing. It is amazing. I mean, Kamala Harris goes the furthest because she always goes the furthest. She says, let's ban plastic straws.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's really difficult to drink out of a paper straw when if you don't gulp it down immediately, it starts to bend.
Yes.
And then, the little thing catches it. And then, so we got to kind of perfect that one a little bit more.
So you'd ban it, but rely on innovation.
I mean, we got it. Yeah, innovation is a process, right? You don't just do it. Innovation is a process, but let's encourage innovation, and I think we could do a little bit better than some of those flimsy plastic straws.
I'm taking your plastic straws. I don't have any alternative. They're garbage, these paper straws, but I'm banning them anyway. I have a question. Was there anything she said that was funny? Because she apparently thinks that she is just a jolly good time. Kamala Harris. She has the Hillary Clinton annoying tick of everything got awkward, so now I'm going to laugh, like a lot, like hysterically, like someone's tickling my feet, funny. And it's real weird. So that's good. Andrew Yang, my boy. So Andrew Yang. I like Andrew Yang, right? He came on my Sunday special. I like him as a dude. I think he's an interesting fellow. Andrew Yang had one proposal that was the only good proposal of the night. He talked about geoengineering, which is working to create technologies that can actively change the climate, which we should be checking out because technological innovation, it's been humanity's way out of the dark ages ever since the dark ages. So that was a good idea. But then he also was like, you know what? Let's ban commercial air travel. Andrew, no. The answer is no, especially because commercial air travel represents 3.5% of all carbon emissions in the United States at this time.
What aspects of the Green New Deal do you support and which do you reject?
I love the vision of the Green New Deal. The framers of it have done us all a great service by energizing so many people around a vision. And to me, the only issue I have with the Green New Deal is the timing and the timeline. I mean, they are right that we need to take urgent action, but the timeline that they put out there would do away with commercial air travel and a lot of other things in a particular time frame, that if we have a little bit more time, we can head in the same direction and achieve most of the same value.
Okay, well, actually, so I got that wrong. Andrew Yang, he did it right. Bad labeling, everyone. So Andrew Yang actually got that one right. The only reasonable person on the stage continues to be Andrew Yang, who is wildly undercovered by the media. So excellent job, everyone in the Democratic Party. You've made clear how insane you all are. I will say that the best Democrat, in terms of just being honest, is Bernie Sanders. Always, always, always. So this crazy old loonbag. He was on the stage last night for the 7-hour marathon of horror. in which Democrats pledge to basically destroy your life. And Bernie was like, I'm not just going to pledge to destroy your life. I will destroy all future lives, particularly in poor countries filled with brown people. That's kind of what he was saying. He was real awkward. So he was asked specifically about population growth. Now, this has been a thing on the left for a very long time, is this weird idea that there are too many people, and the too many people will eventually create a scarcity of resources and we will all plot. Nope, that has never been true. We have more people than in the history of humanity, and they are richer on average than any time in the history of humanity. That is not a coincidence. It is also not a coincidence that population growth slows as people get richer. So it turns out that the problem sort of takes care of itself as a general rule. But there are a bunch of people on the left who are like, you know what would stop climate change? Fewer people. Let's just stop with the people already. And so this lady asks Bernie Sanders about it. He's like, yes, we should certainly fund abortion in poor countries so there won't be poor people. It's like, dude, like you're always going on about the corporations are hurting the poor people. We have to help the poor people. We can't hurt them. All we have to do is kill them before they're born. Then we won't hurt them because they won't even feel it. They'll be dead. It got real awkward.
Empowering women and educating everyone on the need to curb population growth seems a reasonable campaign to enact. Would you be courageous enough to discuss this issue and make it a key feature of a plan to address climate catastrophe?
Well, Martha, the answer is yes. The Mexico City Agreement, which denies American aid to those organizations around the world that allow women to have abortions or even get involved in birth control, to me is totally absurd. So I think, especially in poor countries around the world, where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies.
Oh, so if they have fewer babies, there's less climate change. Let's make sure that we have the abortion funding available to those women in poorer countries so they can kill their babies, and then we solve climate change too because there are fewer poor babies in Like 2 weeks ago, people on the left were suggesting that pro-lifers are eugenically directed toward white supremacy or some nonsense. And then you got Bernie, who's basically just like, you know, it would be good, fewer people. Where should these fewer people exist? In poor countries. Let's send them money to kill their own babies, and then we won't have to worry about those. This is insane. Bernie's a Bond villain. Guys, all of the criticisms that Bernie makes about these supposed plutocrats at the top of politics who want to control your life and ruin the future and all, he's one of those people. It's scary. So that's all good. Honestly, Donald Trump could not have asked for a better night than last night. So all he needs to do is what I've been saying all along if he wishes to win re-election. It's like the end of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake with Donald Sutherland. All he has to do is scream and point at the Democrats. That's all. And he will win. If he decides that he's going to tweet about hurricanes hitting Alabama, it makes things a little more awkward. So, Mr. President, just point at the Democrats. That's all. That's all. Just be one of those weird people who stands on street corners and flips signs. But make the sign just be an arrow that points directly at Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren because they keep saying insane things. They keep saying crazy things over and over and over. It's making them unpalatable. By the way, the polls show that this is true. It's the reason why Joe Biden does well in general election matchups against Trump. But the other Democrats are not doing nearly as well. Okay, we'll be back here tomorrow with much, much more. We're reaching the end of the week together. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.